Hello and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Cassidy. If it's not, thanks for always tuning into my videos. If you didn't know, I am a co-host in Whateverthon. I am joining the team Beach Readers. So my other co-hosts are Steph, India, and Ashley, and of course Whateverthon is a readathon in June that has been created by Maddie over at Book Browsing Blog. And so this year, pretty much with Whateverthon, the goal is to read whatever you like, but this year each team has a bingo board, and the bingo board has a bunch of prompts for everyone, but each team has 5 specific team prompts, and I wanted to give you some recommendations and some reads that I'm going to read maybe for these prompts. Steph is doing this video. I believe India is also doing a recommendation video of some sort, but I definitely got this idea from Steph. It's such a great idea, and I think her video will be out before mine, so definitely go check it out, and I will link it in the description bar below, as well as Maddie's announcement video. So for Team Beach Readers, we have the prompt of dark romance. So this is a genre that I am just dipping my toes into, and so if you're like me and are just trying to like dip your toes into it, I like fantasy books and I like thriller books mainly. I would recommend the Mind F series. Although I did actually hate the ending of this book series, I enjoyed the series so much, and I am the minority. I'm the only person I know who hates the ending of this series for what I hate it for. You will love it. If you are not me, you will love the ending. This is a dark romance that follows a serial killer and a detective who unknowingly fall in love, start dating, and obviously he's on her case and trying to figure out who the serial killer is, but doesn't know that she's the serial killer, and you're following a major plot line. This is why I would recommend this to people who are dipping their toes into it. The romance goes kind of in the back burner, and the major plot of this is the serial killer and finding the serial killer, and also finding out what was done to the serial killer. We obviously know who she is, but we're learning her backstory with the detective. It's really good. Well, until the ending. But still, I gave this is a series of 5 novellas. They're about 150 on average pages. They read quite like one book, and I would recommend binging them all. But I gave the 4th novella 4 stars. So I think all the rest got 3 besides the last one. We don't talk about the last one. But as I said, if you are not me, you will probably like it. But another one that I will recommend is There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. Another one that I didn't like the ending for, and I just pretend the second book in the duology doesn't exist. This one follows a serial killer who kind of has a competition with another serial killer, and the other serial killer like wants to be him and is jealous of him, so the other serial killer kidnaps a woman that the main serial killer is kind of fond of and leaves her to die for the other serial killer. The other serial killer then finds her but isn't interested, and she then somehow survives, and it gets intriguing. It literally just gets intriguing from there, and romance obsession is what I would call it blossoms. Obviously with dark romance there are triggers. Both these books have triggers for rape, and in the Mind F series there are triggers for homophobia, but people are dying because they're homophobic. And there's triggers for stalking, and There Are No Saints, but dark romance does tend to have triggers, so please look up any triggers that you are. Other than this, another one that I hated but I could recommend is probably Verity by Colleen Hoover. I hated this, but lots of people love it. Quick, easy read, and it is a summer thriller too, so I think you could knock that off, both of those prompts, because summer thriller is our next prompt. I have a whole TBR video of dark romance, since this coming weekend is 72 Hours in the Smut Den, where I'm planning to read only dark romance, so I have a whole TBR video for that, and I will link that down below. I will most likely just be reading whatever I don't read during 72 hours for Whateverthon, but something I'm really interested in is in Peace Lies Havoc, as well as the Chasing Addison? That's not the right term, but I'll put the book covers up here. And yeah, you could go check out the Dark Romance TBR for lots of recommendations of ones I haven't read that I want to read. And Mel also has a Dark Romance TBR recommendation video out, so you could go look at those. And then the next prompt for Team Beach Readers is the summer thriller. So I had a lot of people ask me kind of what this would be, what this would count for in the Discord for Whateverthon, and I think this is a very broad category. We probably should have gone with seasonal thriller to not confuse people. For me, this is a thriller that takes place in the summertime, so something like The Last Time I Lied, which takes place in a summer camp. Also, The Last Time I Lied is on India's favorite list, so you could read that and get the host fave little point. There are a lot of them. Another way to look at it is just a thriller that came out in the summer. So I believe most Grady Hendrix, although technically horror, come out in the summer. Same with Riley Sager. Riley Sager does have a new book in June. It comes out late June, but his books are so bingeable that you could definitely read it before the end of the readathon, which is The House Across the Lake. And this has water on the cover, which is another prompt. Essentially, I would say it's just a thriller that does not have snow or winter setting, or even like a fall setting. Like, try to stay towards spring, summer, those like hotter weathers. I would say my biggest are Last Time I Lied, Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, Home Before Dark, honestly any Riley Sager. And I also personally loved The Whisper Man by Alex North, but not a lot of people do, when it is about a child who is hearing whispers out his window and then telling his dad, but his dad thinks he's seeing ghosts, and there is a kidnapping plotline happening during it as well. Some thrillers that I might pick up is The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson, which I believe follows a pair that meet and then decide to help murder their significant others together. And My Lovely Wife by Samantha Shannon, which it just says that it is kind of like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I loved that movie growing up, so I want to read this one. And then also Replica, which is a story that is kind of told very weird, so that's why I want to read it, where you have one girl's story and the other girl's story if you flip it around, and they meet in the middle. And so they pretty much say what you can either read one girl and then one girl, or you could read one chapter, one chapter, one chapter, one chapter. I have no idea what this is about. Just thought that the uniqueness of this was so cool. There's a literal butterfly on the cover, so if this doesn't scream summer, I don't know what does. The next prompt is political fantasy, so this is kind of where I live and breathe. I love fantasy. I specifically love a political fantasy. The unofficial official book club pick for June is The City of Dusk, which would 100% fall into a political fantasy, so if you are reading this along with us by Tara Sim, this would work for political fantasy. I'm obviously reading this. I haven't read it yet. One that I have read and loved, but it's chunky, so it scares a lot of people, is Legacy of Ash. Lots of politics are happening in this one, and it's great. It's delicious. We're following 3 main characters, 2 of which are political prisoners because their mother was the captain of the revolution before, and then the other one is the person that killed their mother, and they kind of all have to work together, and it's really good. I really like it. I would recommend. Can always go with Assassin's Apprentice for a political fantasy. Robin Hobb loves her politics, and this follows our main protagonist, Fitz Farseer, who is the bastard son to the current king in waiting, and when it comes out that the current king in waiting, he has a bastard, he abdicates the throne, and Fitz ends up being sucked into the world of politics by his grandfather, who decides to use him as an assassin instead of letting him kind of be a what if he decides to come back and claim the throne type character. Lots of politics in this one. The first one is quite short. Robin Hobb is a slow writer, but the most amazing worlds. Also would recommend Elborn, which is more religion political, but it is political. And this is also a indie self-pub, which counts for our next prompt. This is following 4 main characters who suddenly wake up with powers, but the current religion is looking for people with powers like them and burning them at the stakes. So they need to kind of figure out what happened, why they woke up with this vision and these powers, and also somehow kind of find each other, I guess. And yeah, I really did enjoy this one. And it is also a recommendation for self-pub indie because it's incredible, and we literally just got the title for the next book this week, and I'm so excited. One I don't have with me but is one of my favorites, and I believe it is on Cody's host fave list, is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is super political. There's an arranged marriage, and we're following a city that used to be run by magical gods essentially, but something happened and a plague came and took all their powers from them, and now this plague hits regular citizens, and essentially the plague makes it so that they never heal completely, but they also don't die. So if you stub your toe, you're stuck with a stubbed toe for the rest of your life. So they're all put into this city and things start to progress from there. I love, love, love Elantris. It's one of my all-time favorite books. It's already on Cody's list, so I didn't need to put it on a list, but there we go. A little bit less high fantasy, since I am known for high fantasy. We have A Winter's Promise by Castell de Bow, which would be completely political fantasy. We are following an arranged marriage between arcs, and we see a lot of goodness happening and a lot of intrigue, and things aren't always what they seem at a different arc, and following our main character Ophelia, who, yeah, just doesn't really belong anywhere. She has to dress up as a man, very Mulan type, in this first book. I believe you could also call Traitor's Blade political, which is one of Jade's favorites. So this is following the Greatcoats, who had one last mission from their king before he was killed, murdered, head cut off, and they are just now living out that last goal, that last mission, and trying to make the king's dreams come true. We're following our main character and his band of Greatcoats, and the humor in this is excellent, and there is a really good plot happening in these. Yeah, they're kind of like the world's military, but they're not the world's military, and it's good. I definitely recommend this one. I also love this series. I don't have the first one, but it would also work, is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This second book does have water on the cover, which is one of our prompts. City of Brass follows our main character, Nari, who finds out that she is not a regular human. She is descendant of the Jinn people, and she has to go to the city of Daevabad to protect herself because other people are after her, and she is the last remaining member of her family's line, which should have been the ruling line of Daevabad. And you're just kind of following Nari as she figures out the world and the magic, because it's all brand new to her. And we're also following Ali, who is the second son to the current king of Daevabad, and he's kind of the questionable son. He doesn't believe what his dad is saying and all his dad's ruling, and he's just trying to figure out how to either do what he believes is right or follow his family loyalty. And you just see the political struggle in Ali's chapters specifically. This is one of the series that I always recommend to someone who wants to get into fantasy. Higher fantasy. I don't know a single person who hates this series. It's incredible. Another one I don't own is Rune of Kings, which is also on Jade's host faves. This follows Kieran, who finds out that he is actually the son of a royal king, and we're following his life story in two different timelines. The way this is told is really why this book is so loved and why I love it so much. It's done in such a unique way. We're following Kieran's story through his POV, but then, like, essentially he starts a story and he's like, okay, the story starts here, and then he's with a demon named Talon who says, no, the story doesn't start here, it starts here. And we're getting a timeline from Kieran and a timeline from Talon, and then we're also getting an overarching narrator. I love this series, but it is very, very convoluted. I will say, I probably will read House of Always in June, because water on the cover. I am actually quite unsure which ones I'm gonna read for this. I was looking around and I don't know if anything is strictly political that I haven't read that I obviously know. I think The Bladed Faith by David Dalgleish will be political, as we are following another prisoner of war and he is going to reclaim his kingdom, so I believe there's politics in here. Also, if you're leaning towards the more YA side, Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard, which Marissa and Rye are doing a read-along for, would 100% count as a political fantasy. Oh, and one of my favorites, The Swordsman's Lament, it's on my favorite list, is 100% a political fantasy. It's nice and short. It's also an indie self-pubbed book. I'm going to recommend this in the self-pubbed indie area, so I'm not going to talk about it here, but it would work for politics as well. Upon a Burning Throne might work. Maybe I'll read Upon a Burning Throne for political, or I'll continue in the Legacy trilogy or Wheel of Time. I have a lot of political fantasies, and if you're struggling with political fantasies, just send a message my way and I would be happy to give you some personal political fantasy recommendations. It's one of my favorite types of fantasies to read. Oh, and Jade City I also need to read, and Jade City is a political fantasy. It's also on Sandra's favorite list, so you get a host fave for that. Jade City is political in a different way. We're following different ruling houses. You could also stretch this prompt if you don't like a political fantasy to a political romance. Try to do something with a more fantasy aspect, so something like The Bridge Kingdom or a mafia romance or something like that. Those are all political romances. Something that just kind of is more extreme than your regular contemporary, though. Like, I wouldn't say I would choose Red, White, and Royal Blue because it's supposed to be a political fantasy, but a mafia romance is a little bit out of the regular stream, and I think that you could stretch it. The Bridge Kingdom I'm recommending for water on the cover, but it 100% would fit this. It's a fantasy romance, but it is a political fantasy. Same with like From Blood and Ash and Akatar. You could put all those in here. The next prompt is a self-pubbed or indie book. You're on the right channel here. I love self-pubbed indie books. I will fight to the death about them. There are so many out there. Self-pubbed indie, I definitely tend to read in the fantasy genre, but dark romance, anything like KU is filled with self-pubbed and indie books. This is a little bit of a confusing statement for people. What counts as self-pubbed or indie? Self-pubbed you can typically tell because there is no publisher on it, and they say they're published by their names. An indie book is essentially a independent book publisher, so it's anything that's not the big fives. Typically, if you Google it, you can kind of figure that out, but yeah, it's anything that's not like the big five and their imprints. You can definitely Google around. I have to Google sometimes because I'm unsure if a book is indie or not, but self-pubbed is quite easy to find. Of course, I'm going to recommend The Swordsman's Lament by G.M. White. I was sent this by the author and I fell in love with this book. It's so, so good. And I will push it on everyone. It is a host fave. It is my fave in this readathon. This follows our Grand Knight to the King, who is getting old and trying to find a replacement before he can retire. And something happens, there's a murder in the kingdom, and he may or may not be framed for it, and it becomes a murder mystery as he tries to figure out who did it and clear his name. And it is so good. It is really short, perfect for a readathon, and incredible. There is a brand new cover. I'm going to put the cover here because I feel like this cover will steal more people's attention, but I do have the old cover. The new cover is beautiful though. I can throw Illborn on this list as well. I could throw the Mind F series is a indie book. If you like Dragons of Blood and Fire is an indie book. This follows our protagonist who meets some strangers in town, and he somehow ends up with a secret and thrown into this thing that he never asked to be part of, didn't even know was a thing. May not find a dragon. I mean, there's no dragon egg on the cover. I'm not spoiling anything. This is a Aragon type book going into it, and you know that. So he ends up being kind of the chosen one, but he isn't meant to be. Like, there was never supposed to be someone like him. There was never supposed to be another chosen one, but he somehow came to be, and he gets thrown into the world. Dragons, lots of dragons. I gave the first one 3 stars, and it does look chunky, but it reads so quickly. The font is quite big in it, but the prequel novella, which you read after 1, blew my mind and is 5 stars, and I will push this on everyone just because of that prequel novella. So good. You could technically read the prequel novella before you read this one, and it is free on the author's newsletter, but I definitely would recommend reading it second just because that's so good, and it worked that way. Some that I am considering for this prompt is Voice of War by Zach Argyle. This is sold to be a, on Goodreads, I believe the first line of the synopsis says something like their child is born to be the chosen one, but only if they can save his life first or something like that, and it just sounds really good. I know a lot of people who love Threadlight, Voice of War, and I'm very, very excited. A soon-to-be father with a dark voice in his head, a sheltered girl addicted to Threadlight, a young man whose life changes after he dies. Together they will change the world whether they intend to or not. Sounds really good, so I might read this one. Or Burn Red Skies by Kirsten Espinosa Rosario. You can get this one on Kindle Unlimited. This one follows a girl whose summoner army comes and destroys her village, but she hides and she starts training in the elements because she has one goal in mind: to save her brother, but she must go through a dragon to get to him, and the catch is that dragon is already dead. So how do you defeat him? Sounds really good. I can't wait to read. This was a finalist this year in the SFBO Awards. Didn't win, but was a finalist. This is another one I would consider reading, The Fangs of War by E.J. Double, also a self-pubbed indie book. I don't know much about it, to be honest. I'm just obsessed with this cover, and I believe it's very political, and we're following 2 different characters, and they're on opposite sides of an army. Sounds intriguing. Excited for it. Legends and Lattes by Travis Beldry, which is a high fantasy, low stakes. We're following a girl an orc, I believe, who used to be like part of the army, but decided she didn't want to die one day just like in battle, so she opens a coffee shop. This is supposed to be very like high fantasy contemporary type book. I'm excited to read this. I've been seeing it doing its rounds and everyone loving it. Self-pubbed indie. Amazing. My dark romance TBR is full of self-pubbed indie romances that you can find on KU, so definitely check that one out. I could go on and on. I also have a indie fantasy TBR video. I'll link that down below so that you can check out some of these. The last prompt on our beach readers prompt bingo board is water on the cover. We wanted to fit the theme of beach readers. This one is the hardest prompt for me personally. My recommendations for it are The Bridge Kingdom, which is a political fantasy romance following a enemies to lovers. Our protagonist is put into an arranged marriage with the ruler of the Bridge Kingdom to help foster prosperity and an alliance, but things go a little bit south and it's a lot more political than that. I feel like I really did not give that a good synopsis, but I really enjoyed that one. I gave it 3 stars. It has a decent amount of a fantasy plot. It's less romance, which I really enjoyed. Obviously, House of Always. I don't know how many people will agree with me on this one, but I'm putting The Black Coast. This is abstract water, okay? It's an abstract art cover, but this white stuff is water. There's a boat on the water, the sun going into the water reflection. You know, abstract water on the cover. I love this series. We're following the town of Blackkeep, who know one thing: when they see crows, that means raiders are coming, and this time when the raiders show up, they are waving the white flag because something happened in their homeland that they can no longer live there, and we're following the merging of 2 cultures. The conversations in this book are so good. Our characters in this are so good. I need to continue it. Honestly, most of the books that I've read with water on the cover, I realized I don't really like, so it was really hard for me to give you recommendations, but some that I want to read, we have The House of Always. We also have The Sword of Kaigan, which is a indie, self-pubbed, and a political fantasy, so it knocks off 3 birds with 1 stone. I don't really know what The Sword of Kaigan is about, so I can't explain it to you, but it sounds incredible and I'm very excited to read it. If you're a contemporary reader, you probably won't have problems with this prompt as it fits a lot of those, but for me as a fantasy reader, I found it very hard. A horror that I would consider reading is The Cavern, which is a creature feature horror book. I don't know much more than that. I know Sahar liked it. I know Mel liked it. I'm excited. I'm intrigued. It is also an indie book, so it would knock off another prompt on the bingo board. And it is on KU, if you have KU. So yeah, if you have any suggestions for books with water on the cover, let me know, because I am definitely struggling with that one. I know The Night Swim has water on the cover, but again, I DNF'd that book, but it is a summer thriller. You want to knock off another prompt. That's all my recommendations I have for you. Please check out all the other co-hosts' videos. I'm so excited. Whateverthon is one of my favorite readathons of last year, so I can't believe Maddie asked me to be a co-host this year, and it feels incredible. I'm so excited. I hope you join and check it all out. Anyways, if you'd like to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon are all linked in the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day.